We signed up while we were on this cruise to Alaska, and Celebrity was a wonderful, wonderful cruise. They just took care of everything, and you know, it was pretty nice. It was top notch all the way. Go ahead.
So anyhow, yeah, we decided to do these two big things at once, and this gives you a picture of the Galapagos Islands. They are named for the giant tortoises, which the tortoise's scientific name is Galapagos something, and so they called it the Galapagos Islands. There are quite a number of these. We didn't tour all of them, but here's what we did do. This is every day we got a little sheet like this that told us where we're going to go. And if you look at the dotted lines, that indicates where we went. And if you look down here, it says, well, this is the end of the cruise in the Galapagos. It says we've toured 611 nautical miles in 7 days, and we thank you for your patronage and so forth. That's what we did. So we really got around these things. Now, here's what they are. They were all originally volcanoes. Some of them still look like volcanoes. In the last 100 years, there have been 13 eruptions there. We did not see any eruptions, but we did see a great deal of lava. A great deal. You want to talk about our ship?
This was our ship. It had room for 100 passengers. I think we had 83 passengers on the ship. All the ships are small, and this was about as large as any of the Galapagos ships from the various companies are. Chuck's sister went in 2003. They had like 35 people on their ship.
Yeah, it was tough, but somebody had to do it. And this is not us, but it just shows something about the Galapagos, and I want to say that it's true. And what they're showing you is fearless wildlife. This is a place where these animals have had apparently no predators, not many at least. And because of that, they have no fear. You can walk up to these things. Now, some of these sea lions you're going to see look pretty big and kind of scary, but on so many beaches as we landed, it'd be littered with sea lions, and they wouldn't bother us. So one day I got a little cautious, a little curious about how close you can get, and so I got closer and closer to this big sea lion, and finally I got about 6 feet away, he began to bark at me. But otherwise, they're just not a problem. And these giant tortoises are on most of the islands. They don't really know how old they are. They estimate these guys could live to be about 150, if you can imagine that. Of course, they all look pretty old, but this is some of our friends on the back deck. And again, it's a tough life, but somebody had to do it, and we did it. And you can get little snacks when you get back from your shore excursions and so forth, things like that. Very pleasant. These are the guides. These are the Galapagos guides. They take guiding very seriously. These people get college degrees in this thing. They really know what they're talking about. In the Galapagos Islands, there's something like 17,000 people who live there. But every year, there's something like 50,000 plus tourists that come through there. And they are so concerned about keeping it pristine the way it was. They just don't want it to be disturbed and destroyed. And they take it very seriously. It's probably important. But on these tours across the islands, they tell you where you can walk and where you can't walk. And you'll see signs that say stop. And they don't want you just wandering around there. They really control where you go. Well, these guys do that, and do a very excellent job.
You could take nothing onto the island from the ship except water bottles. They made sure you had water with you all the time, but nothing else was brought along. The guides, one of the things I really liked about the Galapagos, the guides are all Ecuadorian. Everything they sell on the ships or on the islands is made there. The T-shirt you buy is not made in China. It's made in Ecuador, which I thought was very nice. So that whenever you go to the Galapagos, you are helping to take care of the Galapagos Islands, because the money that they get from the tourists is the money that they spend to keep the islands up.
And by the way, their money is the U.S. dollar. They put on a little show for us. This is King Neptune here, who was running around with his big, what do you call that thing, trident. And so they did a little show here, and they picked out this lady here to be the queen. And then the others are picked out to come up and pay her proper attention. And what's really interesting about the queen is...
she was one of the two crabby people on the ship. And, you know, after they made her queen, King Neptune's queen, she wasn't so crabby anymore. They picked out the person who really needed the attention. And well, some of the ship was, getting off the ship onto the island, some of that was difficult. And if a person had any mobility problems, as she may have, it was a little bit difficult for them to get off. Every tour, every day, they gave a high-intensity tour and a low-intensity tour. Every time we went on the high-intensity tour, and because we're mobile, it was easy. It was never difficult. And but some people, you know, had a hard time getting in and out of that Zodiac, which we'll show you in a minute.
Yeah, there's the ship at anchor, seen from one of the islands. And you can just barely make out one of the Zodiacs. They are big rafts, and they've got motors. I think there's another picture coming. There it is. Another picture coming up here that shows the outboard motor and the raft. People, we just sit there on the rubber part. You can have wet landings or dry landings. If it's a dry landing, they run that thing up against something, hard lava probably, and then they keep the motor running to keep it there, and then people go up the ladder and out. If it's a wet landing, you got to flip over the side, and maybe the water is, I think it was never more than knee deep, was it?
A little bit more, but not very much. The only thing is that on that kind of landing, you got your shoes full of sand, and it was, I wore my water shoes that I bought just to go there. That's what my sister-in-law went in. And you know, when I went to water aerobics after that, after I got home, I was still dumping sand on those shoes. Just couldn't get it all out.
And this is something you cannot see anywhere else in the world. These are marine iguanas. There are land iguanas other places, but the marine iguanas are not found anyplace else in the world. And they are coming out to see us. Now, this may not be your ideal of beauty, but they are all over the place. And they have no fear of us. They're maybe slightly curious. We walked over them, we walked around them. They were no threat to us whatsoever. Marine iguanas coming out to greet us. And if you look at the back, you can see what this lava flow looks like. Most of the lava flow is a basalt kind of lava. And what that means is it flows differently. It makes kind of ropes of lava. It makes tunnels of lava and strain as it goes along. And so much of these islands are like this. So we're going to show you in just a few minutes one of the driest islands. We call it a moonscape. And then one of the wettest islands. We get to see the difference. On the trip, I had a birthday. And so here they're showing us what lovely cakes. Now, it isn't that they can't spell expedition. That's really the way they spell expedition, so it starts with an X. And the cooking, the food, of course, incredible. It is so hard not to gain weight if you're doing this kind of thing. Well, again, there's a little shot of the back deck, and you see some people sitting around and talking and having fun.
This is Chuck's birthday. We got ready to get onto the island, get off the ship on the island, and he got a rainbow for his birthday. How can you beat that?
Is this some kind of sign, by the way? Does this mean I should be the one giving the $10,000 for the building?
Hey.
How often can you get this? I mean, the day started out just fantastic, and yet my friends asked me, well, what would you really like? What you must like? What do you want? What can we give you? And whimsically I said, dancing girls. Whimsically. What did I get? Well, first I got a cake. That was pretty good. This gives you a little bit of view of the dining area. It's just very elegant. And they brought around this cake. They put only one candle in. They're very diplomatic there. They don't want to give everything away.
They also want to be careful they don't set the ship on fire.
Yes, that's true. Here I am with Bob Bonamici, and I'm getting my cake. And then the next step is this wonderful little tradition where the wait staff comes around and they sing, they play the guitar, and there they are. So
Are those your dancing girls?
No,
we
they're
don't,
coming.
not dancing girls. So we thought, well, maybe things will improve. But here we are, 600 miles off the coast of Ecuador, in the Pacific Ocean. We're on islands that have never been part of the mainland. How many dancing girls could arrive here if they wanted to? What did I get? Dancing albatrosses.
This was such a thrill to see them doing their courtship dances.
They go through this. It is a very elaborate routine. They spread their wings, they make noises, they circle each other's bills. They do all of these things. Maybe you did this when you were young too, I don't know. But they really, there's the bill circling business. And so I figured this is probably as good as it's going to get, because at least one of those guys is probably a girl. And so it went, and it is. And as you can see, they're in this intricate and intimate kind of sexual interaction, and they don't even care if we're there. We can walk right up to them and take a picture, and they just don't care at all. They are
I
fearless.
think I did use the zoom on this one, though.
We may have, but just out of politeness. As we got aboard our Hiram Bingham Orient Express, some of the locals gathered here in incredible costumes, and I got my dancing girls in.
That was this, for those of you who weren't here Monday night, this was in Peru. He finally got his dancing girl.
Yeah, mine we did. Oh, let me go back in. For you people that saw this Monday night, it is a very fine little local band, but the thing that really grabbed us is this kid here.
He was so little. Might have been 2 or 4 at the most, I think, but he was keeping perfect time on that run.
He's on the beat. This little kid is on the beat. Now, why the rest of them aren't in school, I don't know. At any rate, there are a couple of, I guess at least 2, but more than that, I think, urban population centers. This is the one they call Aorta, and this is on the island of Santa Cruz, and this is the place where the Charles Darwin Research Center is located. So we've got this lovely little street here, and I think the next one, well, again, a typical beach landing. They are everywhere. These sea lions are there. Again, they had to come from the mainland. It was, what, 2-hour flight for us to get there on an airplane?
Well, it's 600 miles off the coast.
Yeah, 600 miles off the coast. So these guys came from somewhere. The Humboldt Current runs from deep down at the end of, actually Antarctica, I guess, up the western coast of South America. And the Humboldt Current brings up some cool water. And so what that means is that you have an abundance, really, of fish and other types of animals, sardines, crabs, and a lot of things for these guys to eat. And they will go into the water probably once a day and feast themselves, and they come back and spend a lot of time lying around looking like, I don't know what, college students or whatever. At any rate.
We loved these Sally Lightfoot crabs. They were all over. We took so many pictures of them. You'll see several.
They are apparently not preyed on by any of the other animals. So they're safe. They're around. You'll see them with the sea lions. Sea lions don't bother them. I mean, you'd think these crabs might taste pretty good, but they don't seem to have any enemies. But again, look at the lava condition. We're going to come back to this later. In case you're looking for the animal here, it is there. And it is called a stilt. And you can see why. This is probably one of the inland lagoons. There are some, on the islands, inland lagoons. The water's probably brackish. And you're going to see things like flamingos, like that's coming up. Oh, before that, you want to talk about the boobies?
We loved the blue-footed booby. They were all over, and they were just right there. You could see somebody's fingers in the way there. So that's how close we were to those boobies. One booby, I think he's going to show you another picture of it. no, that's not yet, but he'll show it to you later. One of the movies had her right beside the path, not 3 feet off the path.
Precious egg is
where
right there.
everybody walked, and, you know, they were perfectly fine. And they do have those beautiful blue feet. Bob Bonamici was wearing Crocs that were blue, and we, you know what we call them.
You can guess that. He didn't like it. You remember why they called it a movie? There was a reason.
I don't know.
I don't remember either. Anyway, I don't know. But it is a beautiful bird. It's also a bird that can dive at high speed and pick things out of the water. It's a good flyer. Just a really interesting breed, and just a beautiful bird. Just a beautiful thing. Again, remember, all of these guys, well, the islands, they think there's no island that's older than around 5 million years old. And the youngest one is less than 1 million years old. So these have never been connected to the mainland. So any animals that got here had to come from someplace else. These guys. There they are. We got off at Eora. I think that's where we are here. And lovely beach, and we're walking around, and here's the sea lion. And again, if you don't get within about 6 feet of them, they didn't bother us, although I did read that there have been cases where they get in the water and chase you out of the water, and we never saw that. And I don't know whether we got the ones that got converted or whatever, but they're nice. And iguanas. Look at this. There's a little bit of red on them, and that apparently indicates that they may be in their mating season. The iguanas, many of them are like this. Well, the marine ones are dark. These, I guess, are marine ones. They're dark. They've got a little bit of color on them, probably for breeding season. They don't care at all that we're there. We just walk around them, walk over them. And you can see all these rocks. Some of the walks we took were really, you know, rough. Some of them weren't, but some of them were. And again, if we can give Bob a little credit here, he just had double knee replacement a while back, and he just did wonderful in all of this. No trouble.
He was able to walk on these rocks with no trouble.
Yeah, you can see the possible danger. Here's the one I like. I assume they set these benches up for real tourists who might spend a little money in the area and, you know, things like that. Look what happened. They think they're bunk beds, you know. This, by the way, is Aora, I'm pretty sure, and you can see the different kinds of boats around. A number of people have boats, and which makes sense, and they use them for all kinds of things. But as I say, the population of the Galapagos Islands, the native or the people that live there year-round, is around 17,000, and they think it's going up. So by now, maybe up to around, I don't know, 20,000. Well, there's the land iguana. We got a lot of pictures of them. I guess I maybe put in too few, but this gives you some idea what they look like. And these guys are very tame. Where was it? Guayaquil? We went to the park.
The iguanas in Guayaquil are different from the ones in the Galapagos, but they were tree climbers.
Yeah.
And there was a iguana park where they were all over the trees.
Climbing trees.
Guayaquil is on the mainland of Ecuador.
And some man put his hand down and kind of rubbed against them, and they didn't seem to mind at all. They're just fearless. Well, people have lived here for less than 200 years, and people coming in from someplace, you know, couldn't help bringing in a cow, a goat, or whatever. Some of the remnants of those, and some of those guys escaped. So you'd have feral goats running around out there, and feral sheep, and feral rats, and that would maybe come unexpectedly in the boat or something. Here's Bob holding up a head of a goat, I think they claim they've gotten rid of all those goats, haven't they? They finally have, because they're not native things. They didn't want them there, but they finally got rid of them.
The thing they haven't been able to get rid of are the wasps. They had traps around. They're trying to keep the wasp population down, but we did see some actually. How the wasps got there, I don't know. I expect they came on somebody's ship.
Wouldn't be surprised. By the way, the albatross that we showed you at the beginning here, those albatross, they claim, can stay in the air for a couple of years without touching them. I find it hard to believe, but I did indeed read that. A couple of years, so they could have easily flown from Ecuador and Peru or someplace else to get here. Excellent, excellent flyers. There is one predator. There is one guy at the top of the heap when it comes to predators, and this is what you're looking at him. Now, we were able to get quite close to these guys. Again, we probably use the zoom on this, but this is the hawk. And the hawk, you got to watch out for. He will gobble up things. So he's looking at us and saying dinner or not. I guess it was not because I'm still here. And here it is. Good, tough-looking guy. Here's the one you talked about.
Yes, there's the booby very near to the path with her egg right there. They don't need to build any other kind of a nest. They do have to watch out for the hawk and for some of the other animals, I think, that would get the eggs or the young boobies.
And we think we came at the end of the dry season because you can see none of that guano's been washed away.
Now, we were all very careful when we got too close to them.
I guess she just keeps turning around and around.
And shoots quite a ways.
Got to be careful where you step. But, oh.
That's that baby booby. We love them. They're so white and fuzzy looking. Very, very cute.
Baby booby is facing the world. Here's a good-looking bird. It's an oyster catcher. They claim you can tell by the kind of sounds they make that are kind of high-pitched and all. It's a very good-looking bird. You can't see it too well. It's got kind of a red ring around its eye, and it's got that nice long reddish beak. They think there's really not a lot of them around. I think they gave a figure like maybe a couple of hundred in the whole place. We were able to see actually several, so we feel pretty good about that. We never saw it catch an oyster, but that's what it is. These guys are all over. Now, they take life in the slow lane. They claim that if they eat a meal, it could take it 3 weeks to go through and out the other end. Life in the slow lane. They don't move very fast. You see, he's kind of contemplating his next move for the next week or so. I think he's really working on this slowly. These guys are almost wiped out. A couple of centuries of pirates and sealers and whalers and just general sailors would come to the islands, and they had a pretty good harbor, and they could come and just pick up these things and put them in the hold of the ship, and they could keep them there. They could live for about 100 days without any food or water, so it would give the sailors food, fresh meat, for a very long time. You fill your hold full of these guys. They're quite large, as you can see, and that's it. Not a very nice way to treat these tortoises, but they would do that. As you can see, here's a guy very close to them, and the tortoise doesn't care at all. Oh, this is nice.
This is the Galapagos mockingbird. We'll see more of them later, but we did see quite a few of those all around. They stay there. They don't go anyplace else. It's, the weather is suitable, and I presume they have changed somewhat from the others.
We found them very interesting, and I'll tell you why. I think that's coming up next. No, it's not coming up next. But here's the predator. Here's the hawk, and I think the sign that it's sitting on says stop. In other words, you can't go any further. You're on the end of the pathway. They don't want you going any further. But at any rate, it's using it for just kind of a lookout. And boy, look at that beak. I mean, you don't want to mess with this guy. High-speed diver. They say he can dive at a hugely, like 90 miles an hour, something like that. Come down, grab something, and off. Incredible ability at diving and flying and so forth. Well, there's that Sally Lightfoot. They're all a little bit different. They go straight up. Walls, they go every place. They have excellent, excellent traction. And lunchtime comes to everybody. And as you can see, look how close we are. They don't care. Little one's getting a little bit of lunch, and Mama wants to close the lunch counter. She just turns over, and that's all for a while. And there's the little one getting it. And notice this particular beach area is very, very I don't know if sandy's the word, but it's very small gravel. And you see all these different kinds of beaches, some of them very sandy and beautiful. And again, the land starts as a volcano. And it's a volcano, it's coming over the plate tectonics here, and these plates rub together. One goes under the other, like that. It'll push up this one. And they claim on one of the islands several years ago that one of the beaches was lifted up about 50 feet. But why you've got these plates that are coming together and jamming together and so forth, you'd normally have volcanoes. And as I said before, this is what happens. You've got 13 volcano eruptions in the last 100 years. That's quite a bit. And some of these, you're going to see, some of these look like they are fairly recent. My granddaughter liked this a lot. She liked the caption. She thought that she wants a copy of this picture. Kids. We put in some ducks, and one reason I put these ducks in is show you, we're going to show you more detail later, but this is one of the islands that is extremely wet. We're going to show you the dry one first, and then the wettest one next. And these ducks are actually on a place at the top of Santa Cruz Island, a place they call a farm. And for you farmers, you can decide if you agree or not, but at any rate, there's ducks there. But you can see how wet it is. You can see how moist all of these plants and everything. This is the one we like.
On that other island, go back one.
Yeah.
We actually saw 9 of those tortoises on this island that we counted during the day. Some of them were together, some were alone. We were able to get very close to them, except for the fact that that was the one day it rained, and that woman is trying to crouch down, I think, without getting her pants wet. It's not going to happen.
Not going to. It was a wet day. By the way, these tortoises, you wouldn't think they'd ever get around to mating if they're so slow. But apparently the urge does come upon them. And then the males get a little bit aggressive and they push each other around a little bit. And then the one that's still there is the one that gets to mate with the female. And the others go off and do different things. According to one book, they might go off and try to mate with another male. And one of them even went off and tried to mate with a rock that was shaped about that size. And I don't think any offspring came of that. But you want to talk about this picture?
This was at the Darwin Research Center, and this is one of the mockingbirds. He would stand there holding up, he doesn't really only have one leg, he has 2 legs, but he would hold up one and chirp and want us to give him something. Of course, you cannot give any wild thing anything on the islands, so we couldn't feed him, but he was all around, and sometimes he'd hold up one leg, sometimes it'd be the other one.
It's Steve Jones taking the picture, and there's me in the background. Yeah, he just was going through all of these tricks and hoping to get something out of us, whatever it was. This is a lava lizard. Some of the places that are so, it looks like so terrible to live in. They're so dry, they're devoid of vegetation. There's almost nothing there. You find lava lizards.
I think we saw them on every island, and this looks big, but it's not that big. No. They're only about 6 inches long.
Yeah, very small. Very small. Interesting bird. This happens to be the tallest cormorant in the world, and the only one that can't fly.
Cormorants here, we've had trouble with cormorants on the lakes nearby getting all the fish. But they have cormorants there that have lost the ability to fly because they don't need to. They dive in the water, there's plenty of water, there's plenty of food, so they have no need to fly.
Yeah, they use those residual wings as kind of paddles, so they go through the water at a high rate of speed. Excellent, excellent divers and fishers. Oh, this one. If any of you guys are having trouble attracting women, you may want to pay attention here. This is a magnificent frigate bird. And if you were to encounter this thing on your own, you'd probably see it's got kind of a flappy skin down here that's kind of reddish. But when a female comes by, it takes them about 20 minutes to inflate this thing. But at about the end of 20 minutes, he looks like this, and apparently the chicks really like this. This is a big deal. So I don't know. If you're having trouble attracting women, this maybe will give you some ideas. I don't know. At any rate.
This one is a postcard, but we did see the frigate birds, quite a few of them. Yeah, and we saw them doing this.
And the flamingo. having lunch, putting its head down, as you see, in the water, and then it moves its head back and forth like this, and what that will do is kind of swish some water through, which may contain some kelp or some small animals or whatever it is, and that's lunch for it. So again, in a kind of an inland lagoon, we would come in from the ocean, through over some sand or whatever, and then we'd find this lagoon and find this guy eating, having lunch. We just saw that before. Another postcard, but again, if you...
We didn't get quite that close to them.
well, if somebody thinks you're ugly, say, well, you ought to see how I go on. Well, how many are there?
And they're on top of each other. They just seem to crawl all over each other. They don't mind.
They don't mind.
Hurt anybody.
They don't mind. And they go out, they're marine. They go out, they fish, they can dive great depths, really. They can come back with things. And they all look pretty healthy, so it must be the diving, fishing business must be doing pretty good, I would say. Here's a particularly sandy kind of beach, and this is fairly common. We encountered a number of these things. But if you look at the hills themselves, again, they're volcanoes, and the balsamic volcanoes come down and it's kind of liquid. They don't explode the way other types of lava do. They kind of come down and flow as kind of liquid. So you get kind of these rounded hills looking thing. We did find this very strange. Remember, we're right on the equator. We're on the equator, and yet we found a number of plants that have a seasonal loss of leaves. And so this is like at the end of the dry season. In the dry season, the leaves fall off, and they told us that they would come back later. So here we are on the equator, surprised by the fact that we have a loss of leaves. Here's some people going snorkeling, and apparently there's a lot of things to see underwater if you want to do that. We didn't do that. If you're looking for some cactus to eat, this probably would not be very attractive. The cactus has a way, as you know, of protecting itself. And we know about thorns. Well, they have another thing. They got hair and thorns. We got both here. But many of the islands, you see certain kinds of cactus that look like this, very large, and they've got spines on them. And also, this particular one has some kind of hair on it. So here we are. Islands are young volcanoes. This, I think, was one of the worst in terms of, well, the driest one. And that's a look at the zodiac. Got people coming in, they flop off of there, either a wet landing or a dry landing, and come ashore, and the guides are always there. You just don't wander around on your own. They're there. They're checking. They don't want you getting off the pathway. Look at this island. This, I think, this is called Bartolome Island. It's very small. I think it's like a square mile. And they built, probably at great cost, built this stairway that goes up. And I think it was something like 500 or 360 feet up to the top of this thing. And to protect the environment, you go on the stairway. But look at this, there's almost nothing growing there.
It's also better for your ankle.
Yes, it is. Much better. There's something, I think there's like 2 plants that grow there. One of them is a cactus, as you would imagine. And I think there's only like 2 types of animals that live there. And I don't know that we have a picture of it. I don't think we do. This is like a moonscape. Look at this. Probably a very young island. Very young. Look at it. Bartolome Island. Not green. They just raw, almost raw lava. Look at these. You want to talk about these?
Those are lava tunnels coming down. They, at one point, I think, had roofs over them, but they have broken off. But that's as the lava comes down, it gets hard on the outside, then it's still hot and liquid running down through. You can see as it comes down, it spreads out at the bottom. We'll see some other lava tunnels later.
And give it a few million years, this could break up into soil and look a lot different. Just showing you we're still alive at the time of...
We're not...
We don't look great, but we're still alive.
That was the only time, really, on the trip that we were really too hot.
Yeah, it was amazing. Being at the equator, it was not too hot. This is one of the 2 plants that grows there, the lava cactus. I mean, you look at that and say, you know, the audacity of life. You remember Barack Obama looked the audacity of hope. Here's the audacity of life. This place, it looks like nothing could grow there, but something does. It's amazing. And you're about to be surprised again. Here is a rock called Pinnacle Rock. It looks very nice. People were taking pictures. In the Zodiac, we go right around Pinnacle Rock. And what do we see? Barrett and I were on the equator. What do we see? Well, they're kind of far away. So let's enlarge that. Your eyes do not deceive you. You're looking at penguins living on the equator. Penguins, the penguin is, obviously this is the most northernmost penguin, isn't it? But the penguin is a southern hemisphere animal, and people think they probably got caught in the Humboldt Current and eventually just kept bumping along, and finally it ends up here at the equator at the Galapagos Islands. So there are different of these. This is one of the smaller colonies. They're the bigger ones, but these are very small penguins that you're looking at. This I kind of like. It looks like this penguin is having church. And the church members here are some of the iguanas. There's a Sally Whitefoot crab, and I have no idea what's being said, but they seem to be paying attention. I would say it looks pretty good. Again, you can see the lava outflows, so that's some of these shoals out here. There are little puddles up here, and some green where the water hits it, some whatever, algae or whatever it is, but there's some green up there. There's a nice little natural arch on this particular beach. You want to talk about these?
The sand on these islands is different on every island. If you went enough times, you'd be able to identify the island just by looking at the sand. And at this particular island, I kept seeing these little long purple things. And I picked one up and I said to the guide, "What is this?" He said, "That's a spine off a
Sea urchin.
Sea urchin." I mean, and the sand is, the beach is just littered with them. You think a lot of sea urchins.
A lot of sea urchins gave their last full measure of devotion to make this picture possible. We harmed animals in making this picture. We didn't do it. Oh, this is Bartolome. There's almost nothing growing on it, but right down by the water there is some green. And the thing about this is the kind of picture they put on calendars. You get the beauty, the raw beauty of these islands. You just have to see it to really appreciate it. It's such an incredible, beautiful place. And we think these are fish here, and if they are, they give you some idea of how rich the food supply is for these animals that you've been looking at. That they don't eat each other, unless the hawk maybe does that, but they don't eat each other, but they do eat the fish and the other sea animals, and there apparently are quite a few. And again, in many cases, there's kind of a cool updraft of the current, which brings up cool water, and the cool water really gives rise to a lot of animal life and plant life. So these waters have been fished by fishermen, to feed people. And one of the dangers they worry about now in the Galapagos is overfishing. Of course, we have that problem too.
We did see marine turtles, but they're just very hard to photograph because the light tends to reflect off.
We got a lot of pictures of water, hoping to get lucky.
We did.
Here's some boobies out there. I called it Booby City. They're going to be, there's that lava cactus again, and this is the one island. Now, for you guys who know about farming, this they did call a farm. I put it in quotation marks. I'm a little bit skeptical. But look how wet it is. We're wearing rain gear, expecting possible rain that day. But even if we're not, we're walking in mud. Look at how rich all this vegetation is. Look at how trees. We got big trees, fairly high trees here at this Santa Cruz Island. See, I told you it was a farm. There's an animal there. There's a horse. We did see some cows, not many. And again, they do call this a farm. look at those trees. You know, looks like something you might see around here maybe in the springtime. And those guys again. They don't have real good table manners. If you notice, a lot of these guys, they got something dangling out of their mouth. And, you know, you'd think a friend would say, you know, hey, you gotta look in the mirror.
That's a spinach.
It doesn't happen. Irene said I have too many ducks here. But you can see how wet it is. There's a nice lily.
We think that was planted though. That was at the farmhouse. We stopped there. They had, wasn't exactly a restaurant, but a little snack bar. So we spent some time there. Beautiful flowers.
Beautiful. It's almost, you're looking like you're almost like in a rainforest here. And again, this is not far from that dry island, our south of Talabay Island. This is a big...
This is the lava tunnel, but I told you we talked about it again. But the tree roots would come down through it. We walked through it, and at one place it had caved in so that the light came in. It was kind of difficult walking there. In fact, one of the older gentlemen fell. You think he was able to walk out?
I think he was okay, yeah. I think he was. And again, if you think this is probably started out as just a raw volcano with lava and not much else, and over time, a long time, the soil built up, and there's enough water to make all this vegetation possible. You get trees that look like that. Quite amazing. There's some more ducks. There's two old guys taking a walk. They're all over, they're in no hurry. And amongst all this vegetation, among the moisture and all, there's a little bit of cactus growing.
This was one of the lava tunnels that collapsed, and the water will come in there. We saw some that were actually bridges that you could literally walk across. I'm not sure I'd be brave enough to.
These birds don't clean up very well. There's a lot of guano around there. But look at this is kind of like this ropey kind of lava we were talking about. That you can see it just looks like ropes along here. So this is probably, in this particular case, I don't know what island this is. It's pretty, probably fairly new, has not been broken down yet. And it makes it kind of difficult to walk around. You really got to be careful where you walk in these things.
The prickly pear cactus in the Galapagos grows like trees. It's kind of amazing to me, but then we did see, and we were told that the land iguanas will reach up as high as they can and eat the leaves off the prickly pear cactus. So I presume that's why they through the centuries, have developed the height they have.
They're not going to get those. They're out of there. This is the research center, Charles Darwin Research Center on Santa Cruz Island. And you see some of the buildings there. They're working on projects, a lot of different projects that have to do with the island. This has become a national park, an Ecuadorian national park, since the 1960s. And so they're really taking care of it. They're studying the wildlife. Don't disturb the tortoises. And there's one. We saw a lot of sleeping going on. I don't know what these guys are doing. But there's really like one species of giant tortoise. And there's about, I think it's 14 subspecies. And 3 of these have died out. And so they want to keep them as long as they can. They're trying to keep the species going. One of them is called Lonesome George. Talk about Lonesome George.
You may have read about him in the paper. We read about it since we've been back. Lonesome George is the last of his type from his island. But they found out during DNA studies that there's another island that has some that are pretty close, and so they were hoping that he would breed with them. And they brought the females in, and he just wasn't interested at all. And
of course, he could be 150 years old, don't forget that part.
That's true, but then a young researcher came, and she worked with Lonesome George, and before you know it, he was quite interested. And
we aren't sure what she did.
So they were waiting to see if the breeding was going to be successful. And we haven't heard that, but it'll probably be in the paper if it is successful. There's
some of the native plants in this particular exhibit. Where the giant tortoises come from baby tortoises. And they are serious about restocking these things, and they are doing very, very well in the effort.
It was funny. It was like going to a fish hatchery, or it was a turtle hatchery. You would see some that were really little. I mean, an inch or two across, and then you'd see some that were 6 inches and some that were a foot, and you saw them in all the different stages. And then I suppose they put them back out. And it depends on where they came from, where they were at.
They'll come back in 100 years. And that's it. What questions do you have? Questions?
Question about pollution. We were there 5 years ago when the big issue of pollution from the ships. And where they are with that. But I mean, more people going up the animals. It really is a problem. And it's affecting sea life.
I'm sure it is, and I looked at they gave us a little booklet, and probably you too, a little booklet about all of this, and pollution was in there. And they did describe a little bit about what they do on the ship and whether it's adequate or not, I don't know.
Well, the ships really don't leave the area. I mean, if you're on a large cruise ship and, you know, they grind up all the waste from the kitchens and put it into the water, but I don't know what they do in the Galapagos about food waste and such as that.
These people are really serious about taking care of this.
And they do limit the number of people who go every year.
We had to make reservations a year ahead of time.
It's a wonderful treasure, and the Galapagos Islands have been designated a museum sort of thing by the UN. One of the few places. Right.
Yes.
What did they tell you about Darwin?
You know, they didn't tell us a lot. Let me say a little bit about that. Darwin came here in 1835. He spent about 5 weeks in the islands. I think he visited 4 islands. One of the things that struck him, you saw those giant tortoises, and while he was there, the governor of the islands said to him, you know, I can tell you by the shape and the characteristics of the shell of the tortoise, I can tell you which island that tortoise came from. And Darwin was curious about that. He couldn't quite believe it, but it turns out that the governor could do that. And so he began thinking, well, that's interesting. Maybe some species came here, and then because they're isolated in different islands, they changed over time, and it began to get him thinking about, well, maybe species can change, and of course that's what he did, and that's what he wrote about. Darwin's finches are the prime example. We did not see a finch. Did you see a finch?
Yes, we saw an occasional finch. We thought it was a finch.
No?
Yes.
And they're with the special beaks from different islands.
Didn't see them close enough.
Didn't see them close enough.
They had a special exhibit at Sapsucker Hood of the Darwin finches, and you could see how their beaks had changed according to their environment.
Yeah.
Which flowers they would
Yeah.
plants they would adapt.
So apparently this, this did got Darwin thinking. Aboard ship, they didn't say much about that, did they? And I think Bob asked about that, and I don't know what the answer was.
No.
I think they're careful. They're careful. What else can we tell you?
How much time did you have on all these stops? Do they look like they don't rush you that much?
What do you think, Irene? You want to answer that?
Well, we were there for a week, and we went to, say, about 10 stops, wasn't it? Most of the travel would be done at night, so that we had all day to be on the islands. We would have a couple of hours on a tour, and the tours were short. The islands are not that large. Some of the larger islands we went to on 2 or 3 sides, actually. But we didn't feel rushed. We felt like we got to see it. And of course, you're limited as to where you can go. You go on their prepared walks so that you're not all over the island.
Like, you may be wondering when you look at those islands, how can they land a plane there? The island is Baltra, where they land the plane. The airport is at Baltra, and I think they developed a second one somewhere. But Baltra was, during World War II, was set up to guard the Panama Canal. And it's not very far from the Panama Canal. So I think they did a lot of landscaping there, and a lot of grading there to get that done. But there is a pretty good airport. Now, if you look at that, the terminal's there, but unlike ours that are totally sealed in, it's like partly open air. There's no reason, you don't have to heat it. It's on the equator. It's at even temperature, so it was really a very pleasant experience.
Only small planes went in there though.
Yeah, this was not a huge plane, right?
No, our plane had, the plane was the regular company that flies in and out there, but the plane that we flew on was kind of, well, anyway, it was a celebrity flight, and it was just our tour that was on that plane, so that's as large as the plane was, 500 people in it.
Just curious, when we were on the smaller group, we flew in a commercial flight with other people. After all the security, it was funny because the captain's cabin the door was open, passengers going up to take a look and talk to the captain.
We noticed that too.
The circular hill was real metal.
Yes, but you have a report.
So you could beat somebody over the head.
A different part of the world.
But who want to hijack a plane?
Yeah, we noticed that open cockpit thing too. That was interesting. Very interesting. Very different. What else?
Where's your next vacation? I mean, it's hard to top that.
It is.
It is hard to top that. We haven't planned one.
And if you add in the Machu Picchu and Cusco into that, it's we're going to recoup our financial situation.
As a matter of fact, we were in Peru when everything broke loose in September, and we were really glad we were gone.
As you may know, when you're abroad like that, you can get like a summary of the New York Times, and it can tell you how bad things are back home, and you have no way of doing anything about it. It was great.
We certainly can recommend it. We loved every minute of it. It was just really wonderful. The people were delightful that we sailed with. We had...
Except for the Queen.
She got better.
They gave her behavior modification.
But I thought that was a really neat way to handle a kind of a touchy situation.
It's about as relaxed a vacation we've ever had. I mean, it was just really, it's otherworldly.
It was.
It was.
It was. A good way to put it.
There was no way of describing a place like that. And we had the chance to stay up there.
It really is. And when I was up, we were up on top of Bartolome Island, that real dry one, and I struck up a conversation with a couple, and they were unhappy. They thought that they didn't know. They've heard there was a cruise open that they could get into on a short notice to the Galapagos. This was amazing in itself. But anyhow, they weren't sure they liked it. But after a while, they began to get in, realize what they were doing and began to enjoy it. They had a great time. But it's not like, going to Hawaii or something. It's very different.
There's nothing commercial about it.
No, not at all.
It's almost like stepping back to the beginning of the world. How the world started. I mean, the earth. I mean, really, they didn't have that experience anywhere else.
No.
Where you feel like you have going back. And this
That's
is,
right.
and you want to keep it, and you want to protect it, because it is so precious.
Yeah. We took hundreds of pictures, so what you saw is only a tip of the iceberg.
Actually, thousands.
Thousands, I guess she's right. Well, folks, we got refreshments over here, right? And if you want to ask us some more questions, feel free to do so.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you, everybody.